The champagne cork from last night's celebration still lay forgotten on the kitchen counter as Nathaniel Rivera fumbled with his keys in the pre-dawn darkness. January 1st, 4:30 a.m., the world was silent except for the distant echo of fireworks that had painted the sky hours earlier. His designer suit, wrinkled and reeking of expensive perfume that wasn't his wife's, clung to his guilt-ridden frame as he finally managed to unlock the front door of their Maplewood Heights home. What Nathaniel didn't know was that in the next 60 seconds, his entire world would collapse. The affair he'd been conducting for months, the lies he'd carefully constructed, the double life he'd been living, all of it was about to unravel in the most devastating way possible. Because while he'd been ringing in the new year in the arms of another woman, his wife had made a discovery that would change everything. And now, she was gone. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. The house greeted him with an unnatural stillness. No soft glow from the hallway lamp that Camila always left on when he worked late. No gentle hum of the baby monitor crackling with their 3-month-old daughter's peaceful breathing. Just darkness, thick and suffocating, pressing against him like a living thing. Camila! His voice cracked as it cut through the silence, carrying the weight of his deception. I'm sorry, honey. The New Year's client event at the Grandview Hotel ran longer than expected. The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease, just like all the others he'd told over the past 4 months. But this time, no warm voice called back from upstairs. No sleepy acknowledgement of his return. Just his own words echoing back at him from the empty walls, mocking him. Nathaniel's hands trembled as he reached for the light switch, his fingers still carrying traces of Scarlett Monroe's jasmine perfume, the marketing executive from Harrison and Associates who had become so much more than a professional contact. The woman who had whispered promises in his ear just hours ago as midnight fireworks exploded outside their hotel window. Hey Toxic Truths family. I am very thankful to Sergio Tavares, who sent me a super gift. I am very pleased with you. If you also want me to make a community post about you and talk about you using your name, please buy a membership and send me a super gift. This is very helpful to me in making interesting videos for you. Thank you. One more thing. Don't miss any of today's videos because today's videos are very interesting. Now continue the video. The woman who believed his carefully crafted story about being separated from his wife, about divorce papers already filed, about a marriage that had died long before their daughter Aurora was born. The living room materialized under the harsh fluorescent light, everything in its place except for one detail that made his blood freeze, a cream-colored envelope propped against the crystal vase on the mahogany coffee table. His name, Nathaniel, was written across it in Camila's distinctive handwriting, the same elegant script that had signed their marriage certificate 3 years ago, the same hand that had lovingly addressed their Christmas cards just weeks earlier. Camila. This time his voice carried genuine panic as he called up the stairs. Where are you? His feet pounded against the hardwood steps, taking them 3 at a time. Their bedroom door stood ajar, revealing a perfectly made bed that clearly hadn't been slept in. The decorative pillows were arranged just as Camila had left them yesterday morning, before he'd kissed her goodbye and promised to be home by midnight for their quiet New Year's celebration. No, 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 he whispered, rushing toward the nursery. The door was closed, and for a moment, hope fluttered in his chest. Maybe Camila was sleeping in the rocking chair, maybe Aurora was peacefully dreaming in her crib, maybe this was all some terrible misunderstanding. But when he pushed open the door, the nursery was empty. The white crib where his daughter should have been sleeping lay bare, her favorite stuffed elephant, the one that played lullabies, nowhere to be found. The mobile with dancing stars hung motionless above the vacant mattress, and the changing table was cleared of all Aurora's essentials. Nathaniel stumbled backward, his world tilting off its axis as he fumbled for his phone. His thumb hovered over Camila's contact, the woman he'd promised to love and cherish, the mother of his child, the wife he'd been systematically betraying for months. But before he could dial, his gaze fell back to that envelope downstairs, waiting like a judge's verdict. With dread settling in his stomach like lead, he descended to the living room and approached the coffee table with the caution of a man walking toward his own execution. The envelope felt heavier than it should have as he tore it open with shaking fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 6 words that would haunt him forever. I know about Scarlett. We're gone. Below that, in smaller text, don't try to find us. You made your choice at midnight. Nathaniel's legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the sofa, the letter fluttering to the floor. The magnitude of what had happened began to crash over him in waves. While he'd been celebrating the new year with his mistress, planning their future together in whispered conversations between stolen kisses, Camila had discovered everything. And she'd taken Aurora, their beautiful 3-month-old daughter with Camila's dark eyes and his stubborn chin, and vanished into the night. The house around him suddenly felt like a mausoleum, filled with the ghosts of laughter and love he'd systematically destroyed. Photos of their wedding day stared down at him accusingly from the mantelpiece. Aurora's tiny socks still sat in the laundry basket by the couch, a reminder of the innocent life caught in the crossfire of his betrayal. As the first light of the new year crept through the windows, Nathaniel Rivera sat alone in the wreckage of his marriage, holding a letter that contained the truth he'd been too cowardly to face. While he'd been building a fantasy with another woman, he'd lost everything that actually mattered. And this was only the beginning of how his carefully constructed lies would unravel, piece by devastating piece. December 28th, 3 days earlier. The soft melody of Brahms' lullaby drifted from the nursery as Camila Delacroix Rivera gently closed the door, her movements practiced and quiet after 3 months of new motherhood. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her smile was genuine as she padded down the hallway in her slippers, finally joining Nathaniel on their burgundy sectional sofa. She's finally settled, Camila whispered, curling up beside her husband. 4 hours last night. I think we're making progress with her sleep schedule. Nathaniel glanced up from his laptop, his attention still partially absorbed by the spreadsheet glowing on the screen. That's wonderful, mi amor, he murmured, his fingers continuing to dance across the keyboard. The Richardson account needs these projections by tomorrow morning. Camila studied her husband's profile, the strong jawline she'd fallen in love with during their college years at Riverside University, now set with a tension that seemed to have become permanent since Aurora's birth. The laugh lines around his eyes, once carved by shared jokes and spontaneous adventures, had deepened into worry lines that never seemed to smooth away anymore. Your mother called earlier, she said, tucking her legs beneath her. She wants to come visit for New Year's weekend. I thought it might be nice to have the help, especially since you've been working so many late nights lately. Nathaniel's fingers froze over the keyboard, a flash of something, panic, crossing his features before he quickly composed himself. New Year's weekend? Actually, I just remembered I have that corporate event at the Grandview Hotel. The one for our biggest clients. It's mandatory for all senior associates. Camila's brow furrowed. You never mentioned any corporate event. When did this come up? I definitely told you about it, Nathaniel replied, his tone carrying a hint of defensiveness as he turned his laptop screen toward her. Look, it's been on my calendar for weeks. Harrison and Associates' annual New Year's celebration, December 31st through January 1st. The digital calendar entry looked official enough, complete with location details and dress code specifications. Camila felt a familiar flutter of self-doubt, the kind that had been plaguing her since Aurora's birth had left her feeling scattered and forgetful. Oh, she said quietly, the single word heavy with confusion. I guess I forgot. Baby brain, you know. Nathaniel's expression softened as he set his laptop aside and pulled her closer. Hey, it's okay. You've been incredible with Aurora, working on just a few hours of sleep every night. It's understandable that some things slip through the cracks. He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, and for a moment, Camila felt the familiar warmth of their connection. When I get back, we'll plan something special. Maybe ask your mother to watch Aurora so we can have a real date night. Camila nodded against his chest, inhaling the familiar scent of his cologne, the same Tom Ford fragrance she'd given him for their second anniversary. But underneath it, something else lingered. Something floral and unfamiliar that definitely wasn't her lavender body wash or the baby products that seemed to permeate everything in their house lately. "Nathaniel," she began hesitantly, "have you noticed any changes? Between us, I mean, since Aurora was born." His body tensed almost imperceptibly. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. You seem distant lately. Like you're somewhere else even when you're here." She pulled back to look at him directly. "Are we okay? Are you happy with this life we've built?" For a split second, something vulnerable flashed in Nathaniel's dark eyes. Guilt, perhaps, or regret. But it disappeared so quickly that Camilla wondered if she'd imagined it. "Of course I'm happy," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "You and Aurora are everything to me. I know I've been working a lot lately, but it's only because I want to provide the best life possible for our family." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing the delicate skin beneath her eyes. "You're an amazing mother, Camilla. And you're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, even when you're covered in spit-up and haven't showered in 2 days." Despite her lingering doubts, Camilla laughed, a real, genuine sound that seemed to ease some of the tension in the room. "Flattery will get you everywhere, Mr. Rivera." "I certainly hope so, Mrs. Rivera," he replied, capturing her lips in a kiss that felt almost desperate in its intensity. Later that night, as Nathaniel slept soundly beside her, Camilla lay awake listening to Aurora's soft breathing through the baby monitor. The nagging feeling that had been growing stronger each day refused to be silenced by her husband's reassurances. The late nights at the office had become more frequent. The mysterious phone calls that he always took in another room. The way he guarded his phone, keeping it face down and password protected in ways he never had before. The expensive purchases appearing on their credit card statements, dinners at restaurants she'd never been to, charges from boutiques she'd never shopped at. 3 months ago, when Aurora was born after a difficult labor that had left Camilla bedridden for weeks, she'd attributed Nathaniel's behavior to stress. New parenthood was overwhelming for everyone, she'd reasoned. But as she'd recovered and settled into their new routine, his distance had only grown. Tomorrow, she decided as she finally drifted off to sleep, she would start paying closer attention. Not because she wanted to find anything wrong, but because she needed to prove to herself that her suspicions were just the paranoia of a sleep-deprived new mother. She had no idea that her instincts were about to lead her down a path that would destroy everything she thought she knew about her marriage. The morning of December 29th arrived with the kind of crisp winter clarity that made everything seem sharper, more defined. Camilla had woken before dawn to feed Aurora, and as she sat in the rocking chair watching the sunrise paint their bedroom walls gold, she made a decision that would change everything. Something was wrong. The feeling had been growing stronger each day, like a persistent ache that no amount of reasoning could soothe. Nathaniel's explanation about the corporate event felt rehearsed, and the way his eyes had darted away when he'd shown her his calendar had triggered an alarm bell she could no longer ignore. After Nathaniel left for work with his usual hurried kiss and promise to call later, Camilla settled Aurora in her bouncy seat and opened their shared laptop, the one they'd bought together when they'd first moved to Maplewood Heights 3 years ago. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard for a moment before she typed in the password they'd always used, their wedding date, 05172021. The browser opened to Nathaniel's most recent session, and immediately, Camilla felt her stomach drop. Multiple tabs were still open, the Grandview Hotel's website, a page about their luxury suites, and something that made her blood run cold, a reservation confirmation for their romantic New Year's package. She clicked on the confirmation email, her heart pounding as the details loaded. 1 king suite, champagne service, couples massage, and a private balcony for watching the midnight fireworks. But what made her hands tremble wasn't the romantic nature of the reservation. It was the name listed as the second guest, S. Monroe. Not Camilla Rivera. Not even Mrs. Rivera. S. Monroe. Aurora gurgled contentedly in her seat, oblivious to the fact that her mother's world was quietly imploding. Camilla's mind raced through possibilities, each more painful than the last. A colleague, a client. But what kind of business meeting required a couple's massage and champagne service? With growing dread, she navigated to their shared cloud storage account, the one they'd created years ago to store photos and important documents. Most recently accessed files showed a pattern that made her stomach churn. Dinner receipts from Chez Laurent, an expensive French restaurant she'd begged Nathaniel to take her to for their anniversary. He'd claimed they couldn't afford it. Parking receipts from downtown locations during times when he'd supposedly been at the office, and most damning of all, a receipt from Tiffany & Co. dated just 2 weeks ago. The jewelry receipt was for a pair of diamond stud earrings, beautiful, expensive, and nothing that had ever appeared in Camila's jewelry box. She navigated to their joint credit card account next. Her nursing degree had taught her to be methodical, to gather all the facts before reaching a diagnosis. The pattern that emerged from their financial records painted a picture she couldn't deny. Regular charges at upscale restaurants during his late meetings, multiple purchases from lingerie boutiques, none of the items had ever made their way to her dresser, and a series of Uber rides to addresses she didn't recognize, always late at night when he claimed to be working overtime. Aurora began fussing, and Camila realized she'd been crying. Tears dripped onto the keyboard as she closed the laptop and moved to comfort her daughter, but her movements felt mechanical, disconnected from the storm of emotions raging inside her. "What are we going to do, baby girl?" she whispered into Aurora's soft hair as she lifted her from the bouncy seat. "Mommy needs to figure this out." The day passed in a haze of infant care and mounting anxiety. Every time Aurora napped, Camila found herself returning to the laptop, digging deeper into the digital evidence of her husband's betrayal. She discovered a pattern of deleted text messages, always at the same times, always immediately after certain phone calls. She found browser history that had been cleared, but not completely, searches for discreet restaurants, weekend getaways, and most painfully, how to tell your wife you're leaving. By afternoon, Camila had convinced herself she was losing her mind. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Perhaps S. Monroe was a client who needed special attention for a major account. Maybe Nathaniel was planning some elaborate surprise and had booked the romantic package by mistake. 6 years of marriage deserved the benefit of the doubt, didn't it? Her phone chimed with a text from Nathaniel. "Working late again. Client emergency. Don't wait up for dinner." The message arrived at 3:47 p.m., unusually early for a work emergency, especially on a Friday when most businesses were winding down for the weekend. Camila stared at the text, then at Aurora, who was sleeping peacefully in her crib, tiny fists curled beside her head. She made a decision that would prove to be the first domino in a chain of events that would shatter her carefully constructed life. "Rachel," she said when her best friend answered the phone. "Can you come watch Aurora for a few hours? There's something I need to do." "Of course," Rachel replied immediately. "Is everything okay? You sound strange." "I hope so," Camila lied, already mentally planning her route to Nathaniel's office building. "I really hope so." An hour later, Rachel arrived with homemade cookies and the kind of concerned expression that made Camila feel guilty for not confiding in her. But how could she explain the growing certainty that her marriage was built on lies without sounding paranoid and delusional? "Are you sure you're okay?" Rachel asked for the third time as Camila gathered her purse and car keys. "I'm fine," Camila replied, the lie bitter on her tongue. "Just need to run some errands before the weekend. I'll be back by 8. As she drove toward downtown Maplewood Heights, Camila's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Part of her hoped desperately that she would find Nathaniel exactly where he claimed to be, at his desk, buried in spreadsheets and client reports, the victim of her postpartum anxiety and sleep-deprived paranoia. But a larger part of her, the part that had been growing stronger with each suspicious charge and each deleted text message, knew she was about to discover something that would change everything. The financial district was quieting as the workday ended, office lights beginning to wink out one by one. Camila parked across the street from Rivera and Associates and settled in to wait, her heart hammering against her ribs as she scanned the building's entrance for any sign of her husband. She didn't have to wait long. At 6:15 p.m., the glass doors of Rivera and Associates swung open, and Camila's breath caught in her throat. Nathaniel emerged, but he wasn't alone, and he certainly wasn't dressed like someone who'd been buried in spreadsheets all day. His usually conservative work attire had been replaced by the charcoal gray suit he typically reserved for special occasions, the one she'd helped him pick out for their friend's wedding last summer. Beside him walked a woman Camila had never seen before, and the sight of her made something cold and sharp twist in Camila's stomach. She was tall, probably 5'8" in her heels, with cascading auburn hair that caught the streetlights like fire. Her burgundy dress hugged her figure in a way that spoke of expensive taste and confidence. But what made Camila's hands start shaking wasn't the woman's beauty, it was the way she and Nathaniel moved together. They weren't walking like colleagues. They weren't maintaining the careful distance of business associates. The woman's hand rested naturally on Nathaniel's arm as they descended the steps, and when he leaned down to whisper something in her ear, she threw her head back and laughed with the kind of unguarded joy that Camila remembered sharing with her husband in what felt like another lifetime. Camila fumbled for her phone, her nursing training kicking in despite her emotional turmoil. Document everything. Get the facts. She managed to take several photos as they walked down the street, though her hands were trembling so badly she wasn't sure how clear they'd be. They turned toward Riverside Avenue, where the city's most expensive restaurants clustered like jewels along the waterfront. Camila waited 30 seconds before starting her car and following at a distance, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the engine noise. They stopped at Bellacourt, an Italian restaurant where Camila had once suggested they celebrate Nathaniel's promotion. Too expensive for a Tuesday night, he'd told her then. Maybe for a really special occasion. Apparently, Monroe qualified as a special occasion. Camila parked half a block away and watched through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows as the hostess led them to an intimate corner table. Even from a distance, she could see the easy familiarity between them, the way Nathaniel pulled out the woman's chair, how she touched his hand when she laughed, the way they leaned across the table toward each other like they were sharing secrets. This wasn't their first dinner together. This was the comfortable intimacy of two people who knew each other well, who had shared countless meals and conversations and moments that should have belonged to Camila. She sat in her car for 2 hours, watching her husband charm another woman with the same gestures and expressions he'd once used to win her heart. She watched him order wine, the expensive Barolo he claimed they couldn't afford for their anniversary. She watched him reach across the table to brush a strand of hair from the woman's face with a tenderness that made Camila's chest ache. And she watched the woman lean into his touch with a smile that spoke of promises and future plans. The most devastating moment came when Nathaniel's phone buzzed on the table. Camila saw him glance at the screen, then show it to his companion. They both looked at the message and shared what appeared to be a knowing look before Nathaniel typed a response. 30 seconds later, Camila's own phone chimed. Client dinner running long. Will be very late. Don't wait up. Love you. The lie came so easily to him that it obviously wasn't the first time. Camila stared at the message through blurred vision, watching her husband of 6 years fabricate his alibi while his mistress watched with what looked like amusement. When they finally left the restaurant at nearly 9 p.m., Camila's worst fears were confirmed. They didn't part ways on the sidewalk with professional handshakes. Instead, they walked hand in hand toward the Meridian Hotel, 3 blocks away. Nathaniel's free hand rested possessively on the small of the woman's back, and when they stopped at the hotel entrance, he kissed her. Not a polite peck on the cheek, but a deep, passionate kiss that spoke of intimacy and ownership and everything Camila thought belonged to their marriage. Camila drove home in a state of shocked numbness, her mind struggling to process what she'd witnessed. The man she'd married, the father of her 3-month-old daughter, the person who'd promised to love and cherish her for better or worse, was living a double life with a sophistication that suggested months, maybe years of practice. When she arrived home, Rachel took one look at her face and immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. Camila, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. I wish I had, Camila managed, accepting Aurora from Rachel's arms and holding her daughter close like a lifeline. At least ghosts are just memories. This is my present. My reality. Talk to me, Rachel said gently, guiding Camila to the couch. What did you find? For the first time since discovering the hotel reservation that morning, Camila allowed herself to speak the truth out loud. Nathaniel is having an affair. I saw them together. I watched him lie to me while she sat there smiling. The words hung in the air between them like a bomb that had finally detonated after months of ticking quietly in the background. Are you sure? Rachel asked, though her tone suggested she could see the certainty written across Camila's face. He's taking her to the Grandview Hotel for New Year's, Camila continued, her voice growing stronger as the shock began to transform into something harder and more determined. He told me it was a corporate event, but I found the reservation. It's a romantic package for two. Her name is S. Monroe. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, Camila. I'm so sorry. I have photos, Camila said, pulling out her phone with steady hands. And receipts. And a credit card trail that goes back months. She looked down at Aurora, who was sleeping peacefully against her chest, completely unaware that her world was about to change forever. What are you going to do? Rachel asked quietly. Camila was quiet for a long moment, her mind already racing ahead to the conversations she needed to have, the decisions she needed to make, the life she needed to rebuild from the ground up. I'm going to make sure he can never lie to me again, she said finally. And I'm going to protect my daughter from a man who clearly values his own desires more than his family. The naive woman who had woken up that morning believing in her marriage was gone forever. In her place sat someone harder, someone who understood that sometimes the person you trust most is the one most capable of destroying you. And Nathaniel Rivera was done being destroyed. December 30th dawned gray and bitter, matching the frost that had settled over Camila's heart during the sleepless night that followed her discovery. She'd spent the dark hours feeding Aurora and staring at the photos on her phone, each image a fresh stab of betrayal that made her chest tight with rage and grief. Nathaniel had come home at 2:30 a.m., sliding into bed with the practiced stealth of someone accustomed to deception. He'd whispered that he was sorry for being so late, that the client dinner had been unavoidable, and pressed a gentle kiss to her shoulder that now felt like acid against her skin. Camila had forced herself to remain still, to breathe evenly, to play the role of the trusting wife for just a little longer. Now, as morning light filtered through their bedroom curtains, she watched her husband prepare for what he believed was just another day of successful deception. He hummed softly as he shaved, the same tune he'd hummed on their honeymoon in Santorini. The casual cruelty of it, using their song while living a lie, almost broke her composure. I'll probably be late again tonight, he said, emerging from the bathroom with a towel around his waist. Richardson wants to finalize the Henderson merger before the holiday weekend. Another lie, delivered with the same caring tone he used when telling Aurora he loved her. Camila managed a sleepy murmur of acknowledgement while her mind catalogued every word for the conversation she knew was coming. After Nathaniel left, Camila moved through her morning routine with mechanical precision. Feed Aurora, change her diaper, start the coffee, check the weather. Normal activities that felt surreal in the aftermath of her shattered world. But underneath the mundane tasks, her mind was working with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. She needed more than photos and credit card statements. She needed irrefutable proof that would leave no room for manipulation or gaslighting. She needed to know exactly who S. Monroe was and how long this had been going on. And most importantly, she needed to understand what Nathaniel's real intentions were for their marriage. The opportunity came sooner than expected. At 11 a.m., Nathaniel's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, the device he'd apparently forgotten in his rush to leave. Camila stared at it for a full minute before Aurora's crying from the nursery forced her into action. But as she changed Aurora's diaper, the phone continued buzzing with incoming messages. When Aurora settled into her swing for a nap, Camila returned to the kitchen with trembling hands. Nathaniel's password had always been simple, his mother's maiden name followed by the year they met. He'd never changed it, even after she'd teasingly suggested he should use something more secure. The phone unlocked immediately, and Camila's world tilted further off its axis. 17 unread messages from Scarlet Two Hearts filled the screen, each one more devastating than the last. The emoji heart next to the name was like a knife twist, the same heart he used for Camila's contact information, cheapened and duplicated for his mistress. Good morning, handsome. Can't stop thinking about dinner last night. You were right about the Barolo. We should get a case for the cabin. 2 more days until New Year's. I can't wait to start our life together properly. Have you decided when you're going to tell her? I know it's hard, but we can't keep living in limbo. I saw the most beautiful cribs at Morrison's yesterday. I know we said we'd wait, but I can't help imagining our future. The messages continued, each one revealing deeper layers of betrayal. This wasn't just an affair. It was a complete alternate life. Nathaniel and Scarlett had been planning a future together, making decisions about homes and children and a life that would replace everything Camila thought she had. But it was the earlier message thread that destroyed her completely. Scrolling back through weeks of conversations, she found the exchange from 3 months ago, just days after Aurora's birth. Scarlett, how was the delivery? Is everything okay? Nathaniel, complicated. She's fine, baby's fine. But this changes things for us. Scarlett, I know. But we knew this might happen. We'll figure it out. Nathaniel, I love you. This doesn't change that. Just makes the timing more complicated. Scarlett, I love you too. However long it takes, I'll wait. You're worth it. He'd been texting his mistress about their daughter's birth. While Camila was recovering from emergency surgery, while she was learning to breastfeed and struggling with postpartum complications, Nathaniel had been reassuring another woman that their affair would continue despite the inconvenient timing of his daughter's arrival. The phone slipped from Camila's numb fingers, clattering onto the granite countertop as she ran to the bathroom and retched until her stomach was empty. When the nausea finally passed, she sat on the cold tile floor and allowed herself 5 minutes to fall apart completely. She sobbed for the marriage she believed in, for the man she'd thought she knew, for the family she'd imagined they were building together. But when Aurora's soft cries drifted from the nursery, Camila pulled herself together with a strength she didn't know she possessed. Her daughter needed her to be strong now. Her daughter needed her to make the right choices, even if those choices would tear their world apart. She returned to Nathaniel's phone with renewed purpose. This time, she methodically screenshotted every message, every photo, every piece of evidence that painted a complete picture of his deception. She found photos of Scarlett in lingerie that Camila recognized from their credit card statements. She found discussions about divorce strategies and custody arrangements. She found plans for a New Year's Eve that would apparently serve as Nathaniel's official transition from husband to ex-husband. Most damning of all, she found a conversation from the previous week where Nathaniel had told Scarlett he would file for divorce immediately after the holidays. "It's better if I wait until after New Year's," he'd written. "She'll be emotional about the holidays, and I don't want to seem cruel. Besides, 1 more week doesn't matter in the long run." The calculated coldness of his planning was breathtaking. While Camila had been buying him Christmas presents and planning their first New Year's as a family of 3, Nathaniel had been orchestrating the end of their marriage with the same attention to detail he brought to his business deals. By the time she finished documenting everything, Aurora had woken up and was demanding lunch. As Camila fed her daughter, she found herself speaking aloud for the first time since her discovery. "Your daddy thinks he's very smart, little one," she whispered, stroking Aurora's soft cheek. "He thinks he can control this story, decide when and how it ends. But he's forgotten something important." Aurora's dark eyes, so much like Nathaniel's, gazed up at her with complete trust. "He's forgotten that I'm not the same woman he married. I'm your mother now. And mothers protect their children, no matter what it costs." The plan that began forming in Camila's mind was audacious in its simplicity. If Nathaniel wanted to spend New Year's Eve with his mistress, believing he was managing his transition from one life to another with careful precision, she would give him exactly what he wanted. But she would also give him something he wasn't expecting. the chance to see exactly what his choices had cost him, in the most public and undeniable way possible. Scarlett Monroe was about to discover that the man she'd fallen in love with was not the separated, soon-to-be-divorced romantic hero of her imagination. And Nathaniel Rivera was about to learn that his wife was far more formidable than he'd ever given her credit for. The game was about to change completely, and for the first time since discovering his betrayal, Camila was going to be the one controlling the rules. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. Alright, let's get back to it. December 31st arrived with an energy that felt electric, as if the entire city of Maplewood Heights was holding its breath before the transition to a new year. For Camila, it marked the beginning of the most important day of her life, the day she would take control of her narrative and force the truth into the light. She had spent the previous evening in careful preparation after Nathaniel returned home to retrieve his forgotten phone. He'd been visibly relieved to find it exactly where he'd left it, never suspecting that every secret it contained had been meticulously documented. When he'd kissed her goodbye that morning, claiming he needed to arrive early at the hotel to help with event setup, Camila had smiled and wished him a wonderful time with a sincerity that wasn't entirely feigned. After all, she genuinely hoped he would have an unforgettable New Year's Eve. Just not in the way he was expecting. The first call she made was to Margaret Rivera, Nathaniel's mother, who lived 40 minutes away in Pinehurst. Margaret had always been kind to Camila, treating her like the daughter she'd never had, and the betrayal of that relationship felt like another loss layered on top of everything else. "Margaret, it's Camila," she said when the older woman answered. "I was wondering if you could watch Aurora tonight. Something's come up, and I need to take care of it." "Of course, Mija," Margaret replied immediately. "Is everything all right? You sound stressed." "Everything will be fine," Camila said, and for the first time in days, she felt that might actually be true. "I just need to have a conversation with Nathaniel, and it would be better if Aurora wasn't there." Margaret arrived at 3 p.m. with homemade empanadas and the kind of maternal concern that almost broke Camila's resolve. As she handed over Aurora's overnight bag, carefully packed with enough supplies for several days, Camila felt the weight of what she was about to do. "Are you sure you don't want to talk about what's bothering you?" Margaret asked, studying Camila's face with the perceptiveness that came from raising 5 children. "Soon," Camila promised, kissing Aurora goodbye and breathing in her sweet baby scent. "I'll explain everything soon." After Margaret left with Aurora, the house felt hollow and waiting. Camila used the silence to make 3 more phone calls that would prove crucial to the evening's events. The first was to her lawyer, Patricia Hendricks, whom she'd contacted the day before to begin preliminary divorce proceedings. "The restraining order paperwork is ready," Patricia confirmed. "Based on the evidence you've provided, the judge agreed to the emergency filing. The emotional manipulation and financial deception patterns you've documented constitute grounds for immediate protective measures." The second call was to James Morrison, a private investigator Patricia had recommended. "I'll be positioned at the Grandview Hotel by 6 p.m., he assured her. "Everything will be documented with timestamps and witnessed statements." The third call was the most difficult. Rachel answered on the first ring, and Camila could hear her children laughing in the background, the sound of a normal, happy family that felt like an echo from another lifetime. "I need you to drive me somewhere tonight," Camila said. "And I need you to trust me when I tell you that what happens might be shocking, but it's necessary." "Camila, you're scaring me. What are you planning?" "I'm planning to save my daughter from growing up with a father who thinks betrayal is acceptable as long as you don't get caught." By 7 p.m., Camila sat in Rachel's passenger seat outside the Grandview Hotel, wearing the midnight blue dress Nathaniel had bought her for their anniversary. The same anniversary when he'd claimed they couldn't afford Bellacourt but had apparently been taking Scarlett there for months. Her hair was styled in the elegant updo he'd once said made her look like a movie star, and she wore the pearl necklace his mother had given her as a wedding gift. She wanted to look like exactly what she was, Nathaniel Rivera's wife and the mother of his child. "I still think you should reconsider this," Rachel said for the 3rd time. "Confronting them publicly like this, it could backfire." The only thing that could backfire is allowing him to control this narrative any longer, Camila replied, checking her reflection in the visor mirror. He's been making decisions about our family's future without including me in the conversation. It's time I reminded him that I get a vote. James Morrison appeared at Rachel's window, tapping gently on the glass. He was exactly what Camila had hoped for, professional, discreet, and completely unremarkable in appearance. They checked into the penthouse suite 40 minutes ago, he reported. Based on the hotel's event schedule, the main celebration doesn't begin until 9 p.m., but there's a private cocktail hour starting now for VIP guests. Perfect timing for what you have in mind. Camila nodded and stepped out of the car, her heels clicking against the pavement with a confidence that surprised her. She'd spent years being the accommodating wife, the understanding partner, the woman who made excuses for her husband's behavior and blamed herself when things went wrong. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst impulses. The Grandview Hotel's lobby was a monument to luxury, all crystal chandeliers and marble floors that reflected the glittering evening gowns of New Year's Eve celebrants. Camila approached the reception desk with the poise of someone who belonged there, which, as Nathaniel's wife, she absolutely did. "Good evening," she said to the young man behind the counter. "I'm here to surprise my husband, Nathaniel Rivera. He's staying in the penthouse suite, and I'd like to join him for the celebration." The receptionist typed quickly on his computer, then looked up with a concerned expression. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Rivera, but Mr. Rivera specifically requested no visitors or interruptions. He said he was here for business and didn't want to be disturbed." Perfect. Even the hotel staff had been instructed to maintain his lie. "I understand," Camila said sweetly. "But you see, it's our anniversary, and I've driven all the way from Pinehurst to surprise him. Could you at least call the room and let him know his wife is here? I promise he'll want to see me." The receptionist hesitated, clearly torn between following instructions and dealing with what appeared to be a reasonable request from a guest's spouse. "Let me check with my manager." While he stepped away to confer with his supervisor, Camila spotted them. Nathaniel and Scarlett emerged from the elevator, dressed for the evening's festivities. Nathaniel wore his best tuxedo, the one Camila had helped him select for their wedding, while Scarlett was stunning in an emerald green gown that probably cost more than Camila's monthly salary. They moved through the lobby with the easy confidence of a couple celebrating their love, completely unaware that the most important moment of their relationship was about to arrive. Nathaniel was laughing at something Scarlett had said when he looked up and locked eyes with Camila across the marble expanse. She watched his face cycle through confusion, recognition, and finally, a terror so complete that she almost felt sorry for him. "Mrs. Rivera?" The receptionist had returned with his manager. "We'd be happy to call up to the room." Camila smiled, never taking her eyes off her husband's frozen figure. "That won't be necessary. I can see him from here." The game was about to begin in earnest, and for the first time in months, Camila Rivera held all the cards. The crystal chandelier overhead seemed to dim as Camila walked across the marble lobby, her heels echoing with each deliberate step. The ambient chatter of New Year's Eve celebrants faded to white noise as every ounce of her focus narrowed to the frozen tableau before her, her husband of 6 years standing next to his mistress, both dressed for a romantic evening that was about to become something entirely different. Nathaniel's face had gone ashen, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish gasping for air. Scarlett, meanwhile, looked between them with growing confusion, her perfectly manicured hand still resting on Nathaniel's arm in a gesture that now felt obscene to Camila. "Nathaniel," Camila said when she reached them, her voice carrying perfectly across the lobby's acoustics. "What a coincidence running into you here. And at a business event, no less." Several nearby guests had begun to notice the tension, conversations trailing off as people sensed drama unfolding. James Morrison positioned himself discreetly near a marble pillar, his camera ready but hidden. "Camila," Nathaniel finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" Well, I was feeling lonely on New Year's Eve, she replied, her tone conversational but loud enough for anyone within 20 feet to hear. Our 3-month-old daughter was asking where Daddy was, and I thought maybe I should come see how this important corporate event was going. Scarlett's hand dropped from Nathaniel's arm as understanding began to dawn in her eyes. Corporate event? She repeated, looking at Nathaniel with a mixture of confusion and growing alarm. Oh, you didn't know? Camila turned to address Scarlett directly, extending her hand in a gesture of polite introduction. I'm Camila Rivera, Nathaniel's wife, and you must be the corporate client he's been working so hard to satisfy. The blood drained from Scarlett's face as she stared at Camila's outstretched hand, then at the wedding ring that caught the chandelier light like an accusation. Wife, she whispered. 6 years this May, Camila confirmed brightly. Though I have to admit, the past few months have been challenging with our new baby. Aurora was born in October, such a difficult delivery, but Nathaniel was so supportive. Weren't you, darling? Nathaniel looked like he might be sick. Camila, please, let's talk about this privately. Oh, but I thought this was a public event, she replied, gesturing to the elegantly dressed crowd around them. And surely your colleague should know about your family situation if you're conducting business together. More people had stopped to watch now, sensing the entertainment value of whatever was unfolding. The hotel manager had appeared, hovering nervously at the edge of the scene, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Scarlett found her voice, though it came out strained and hollow. You told me you were separated. You said you'd filed for divorce before the baby was born. Separated. Camila's laugh was musical and devastating. That's interesting. We had dinner together last night. Well, I thought we did. Though now that I think about it, you did say you had that client dinner at Bellacourt, the same restaurant where I found these. She reached into her purse and withdrew her phone, swiping to the photos she'd taken 2 nights earlier. The images clearly showed Nathaniel and Scarlett at their intimate corner table, hands intertwined, sharing wine and conversation. Such a dedicated businesswoman, Camila continued, showing the photos to anyone close enough to see. Working through dinner, holding hands across the table. Very thorough in her client relations. Scarlett stared at the photos, then at Nathaniel, her face cycling through emotions like a broken kaleidoscope. You lied to me, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. About everything. You're not separated. You're not getting divorced. You have a newborn baby. Scarlett, please. Nathaniel finally found his voice, reaching for her arm. I can explain. Don't touch me, she snapped, jerking away from him. The elegant socialite facade was cracking, revealing raw hurt underneath. 3 months. Nathaniel. 3 months of believing your lies about your marriage being over, about starting fresh together. 3 months. Camila's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. How fascinating. Aurora is exactly 3 months old. So you began this business relationship right around the time she was born. Such timing. The crowd had grown larger now, drawn by the spectacle of a public confrontation among the hotel's well-dressed guests. Phones had appeared, recording the drama for social media posterity. The hotel manager looked increasingly desperate to contain the situation. Scarlett rounded on Nathaniel with fury that seemed to surprise even her. She just had a baby and you were with me? While she was recovering from childbirth, you were planning our future together. It wasn't like that, Nathaniel protested weakly, but his defense sounded hollow even to his own ears. Then what was it like? Camila asked, her voice cutting through his stammering. Please, enlighten us. Explain to your colleague here how you've been managing your time between your newborn daughter and your business dinners. She pulled out her phone again, this time opening the screenshots of his text messages. Maybe this will help clarify the situation. She began reading aloud, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent lobby. I love you. This doesn't change that. Just makes the timing more complicated. That was sent 3 days after Aurora was born, while I was in the hospital with complications from emergency surgery. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the full scope of Nathaniel's deception became clear. Scarlett's face went white, then red, then white again as she processed the magnitude of the lies she'd been told. Or this one, Camila continued. Have you decided when you're going to tell her? We can't keep living in limbo. That was from yesterday, while I was at home with our daughter, believing my husband was working late. Nathaniel looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Camila, please stop. This isn't helping anyone. Isn't it? She asked, finally allowing some of her own pain to show through the controlled facade. Because I think your colleague deserves to know exactly what kind of man she's been involved with. Don't you agree, Miss? Monroe, Scarlett said quietly, her voice hollow with shock. Scarlett Monroe. And yes, I think I deserve to know that the man I've been planning a future with is a lying sociopath who cheats on his wife while she's caring for his newborn child. The words hung in the air like a final verdict. Around them, the crowd murmured with the particular satisfaction that comes from witnessing someone receive their comeuppance in spectacular fashion. Nathaniel made one last desperate attempt at damage control. Both of you, please, can we discuss this somewhere private? This isn't the place. No, both women said simultaneously, their voices harmonizing in rejection. Scarlett reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box, which she thrust at Nathaniel's chest. These were going to be my New Year's gift to you. Diamond cufflinks to match the earrings you gave me. The ones I now realize you bought with your wife's money. She turned to Camila with something that might have been respect. I'm sorry. I genuinely didn't know about you or your daughter. If I had... I believe you, Camila said simply. And I'm sorry too. For both of us. The two women looked at each other for a moment, united in their recognition of the man who had betrayed them both, each in their own way. Then Scarlett turned and walked toward the hotel exit, her emerald dress trailing behind her like the remnants of broken dreams. She paused at the door and called back across the lobby, "Don't contact me again, Nathaniel. Ever." And suddenly, Camila and Nathaniel were alone in the crowd, facing each other across 6 years of marriage that had just disintegrated in spectacular fashion. The lobby of the Grandview Hotel felt like a theater after the final curtain call, with scattered applause from onlookers who had witnessed the most dramatic performance of their New Year's Eve. But for Camila and Nathaniel, the real confrontation was just beginning. "Camila, please," Nathaniel said, his voice breaking as he stepped toward her. "Let me explain. This isn't what it looks like." The absurdity of his words after everything that had just transpired almost made Camila laugh. "Not what it looks like. I just watched your mistress throw jewelry back at you after learning you lied to her about being separated. What exactly do you think it looks like?" The hotel manager finally approached, his professional demeanor barely masking his desperation to contain the situation. "Mr. and Mrs. Rivera, perhaps we could offer you a private conference room to continue your discussion?" "That's very kind," Camila replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her chest. "But we won't be needing a room. My husband and I are finished here." She turned to leave, but Nathaniel caught her arm. "You can't just walk away. We need to talk about this. About us. About Aurora." The mention of their daughter's name was like throwing gasoline on embers. Camila spun around, and for the first time that evening, her composure cracked enough to let her fury show through. "Don't you dare use our daughter's name to manipulate me," she said, her voice low but carrying clearly across the marble space. "You were texting another woman about your love for her while I was in labor. You bought her jewelry with money from our joint account while I was recovering from surgery. You planned to divorce me immediately after the holidays without having the decency to tell me first." Nathaniel's face went gray. "How do you know about your phone, Nathaniel?" The one you so conveniently left at home yesterday morning. The one with months of messages planning your new life with Scarlett. She pulled out her own phone, scrolling to the screenshots that had become seared into her memory. Would you like me to read some more? There are particularly interesting discussions about custody arrangements and how to minimize alimony payments. Several people in the lobby were still lingering, clearly hoping for more drama. James Morrison had positioned himself to capture everything, though Camila suspected she wouldn't need his evidence after tonight's public spectacle. I never meant for it to happen this way, Nathaniel said, running his hands through his hair in a gesture she once found endearing. Things with Scarlett, they just developed naturally. But I was going to tell you after the holidays. I was going to do this right. Right. The word came out as a bark of incredulous laughter. You think there's a right way to destroy your family? A right way to lie to your wife for months while she raises your newborn daughter alone? You weren't alone, he protested. I was there. I helped with Aurora. When? Between your dinner dates with Scarlett? During the few hours you managed to be home before rushing off to another client meeting? Camila's voice rose slightly, drawing renewed attention from the lingering crowd. Do you know what I did last Tuesday night while you were at Bellacourt with her? I held Aurora while she cried for 3 hours straight because she was running a fever, and I couldn't reach you because you were too busy being romanced to answer your phone. The memory hit Nathaniel visibly. She could see it in the way his shoulders slumped, the way his eyes darted away from hers. He had been unreachable that night, and they both knew it. I'm sorry, he whispered. God, Camila, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you or Aurora. But you did hurt us, she replied, her voice gentling slightly, not out of forgiveness, but from exhaustion. Every day for months, you made choices that hurt us. And the worst part isn't even the affair itself, it's the calculation behind it. The way you planned every lie, every excuse, every manipulation. She paused, looking at this man she'd once loved enough to marry, trying to find any trace of the person she'd thought she knew. You bought her Christmas presents, Nathaniel. While I was shopping for gifts to put under our tree, you were shopping for her. While I was planning our first Christmas as a family of 3, you were planning your exit strategy. I know, he said, tears starting to track down his cheeks. I know how terrible this is. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, start over. There is no we anymore. The words came out final and irrevocable. There's Aurora and me, and there's you and whatever consequences you'll face for your choices. Nathaniel looked around the lobby as if seeing it for the first time, the elegant crowd, many of whom were now openly staring, the hotel staff hovering nervously nearby, the crystal chandeliers that had witnessed his public humiliation. Everyone's watching, he said weakly. Yes, they are, Camila agreed. Just like Scarlett was watching when you told her we were separated. Just like I was watching when you kissed her outside this hotel 2 nights ago. Sometimes the truth needs witnesses. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, not unlike the one she'd left on their coffee table, but this one was thicker, more official. Divorce papers, she said simply. I filed yesterday morning. You'll be served officially on January 2nd, but I thought you should know tonight, since this was apparently going to be your coming-out party anyway. Nathaniel stared at the envelope as if it might bite him. Divorce? Already? We can work through this. The same way you worked through your feelings for Scarlett while you were married to me? Camila tucked the papers back into her purse. I also filed for emergency custody of Aurora, with a restraining order citing emotional abandonment and financial deception. You can't take my daughter away from me, he said, panic creeping into his voice. I'm not taking her away. You gave her away the moment you decided Scarlett Monroe was more important than your family. Camila's voice remained steady, but her words cut deep. Every text message to her while Aurora was crying. Every dinner date while I needed you at home. Every lie you told while I trusted you completely. The fight seemed to drain out of Nathaniel as the full weight of his situation settled on him. His marriage was over, his affair was public knowledge, and he'd lost both women in spectacular fashion. "Where will you go?" he asked quietly. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere honest." Camila straightened her shoulders, feeling stronger than she had in months. "Somewhere our daughter can grow up without learning that love means lying and betrayal means romance." She turned to leave, then paused one final time. "For what it's worth, Nathaniel, I did love you. The man I thought you were, anyway. But that man was apparently as much of a fiction as your separation story." As she walked toward the hotel's entrance, Camila felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness, that would take time, but the profound relief that comes from finally standing in truth instead of drowning in someone else's lies. Behind her, she could hear the whispered conversations resuming, the story of Nathaniel Rivera's spectacular New Year's Eve already becoming legend among Maplewood Heights social circles. James Morrison fell into step beside her as she reached the exit. "That was incredibly brave," he said quietly. "That was incredibly necessary," she corrected, stepping out into the cold January air that felt like freedom against her skin. The hardest part was over. Now came the work of rebuilding a life from the ashes of everything she'd thought she could trust. 6 months had passed since that devastating New Year's Eve, and the world looked entirely different through Camila's eyes. She sat in the sunlit cafe on Riverside Avenue, watching the morning rush hour through floor-to-ceiling windows while Aurora played contentedly in her high chair, babbling at the colorful toys Camila had arranged on the table. At 9 months old, Aurora had grown into a chubby-cheeked, curious baby whose bright smile could still take Camila's breath away. The cafe had become their regular Tuesday morning spot, a routine that anchored the new life Camila had built from the wreckage of her marriage. The divorce proceedings had been swift and decisive, aided by the mountain of evidence she'd accumulated and Nathaniel's complete inability to dispute the facts after his public humiliation at the Grandview Hotel. The story had spread through Maplewood Heights like wildfire, making Nathaniel something of a pariah in their formerly shared social circles. Camila had moved into a cozy 2-bedroom apartment across town, near her sister Carmen, who had driven down from Denver the day after the hotel confrontation and stayed for 3 weeks helping Camila navigate the legal and emotional aftermath. The apartment was smaller than the house she'd shared with Nathaniel, but it felt clean and honest in ways their former home never had. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Hendricks, her divorce attorney. "He's agreed to all terms. Final hearing scheduled for next Friday. You should be officially free by the weekend." Free. The word still felt foreign to Camila, who had spent 6 years defining herself as half of a couple. But as she watched Aurora attempt to stack her soft blocks, determination written across her tiny features, Camila felt something that might eventually become excitement about the future. "Excuse me, are you Camila Rivera?" The voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. Camila looked up to see a woman standing beside her table, tall, professionally dressed, with auburn hair pulled back in a neat chignon. It took her a moment to recognize Scarlett Monroe without the glamorous evening wear and devastated expression from their last encounter. "Yes," Camila replied carefully, instinctively moving closer to Aurora's high chair. "I'm Scarlett Monroe. We met." "I remember," Camila interrupted, studying the other woman's face. Scarlett looked different than she had that night, older somehow, with shadows under her eyes that expensive makeup couldn't quite conceal. "What can I do for you?" "I was hoping we could talk," Scarlett said, glancing around the busy cafe. "If you're comfortable with that. I understand if you're not." Camila considered this for a moment. She'd thought about Scarlett occasionally over the past months, wondering if the other woman had genuinely been ignorant of Nathaniel's lies or if she'd simply been willfully blind to inconvenient truths. The private investigator Patricia had hired revealed that Scarlett had left Maplewood Heights the week after New Year's, transferring to Harrison and Associates' Portland office to escape the gossip that had followed the hotel incident. "You can sit," Camila said finally, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "But I should warn you, Aurora can be pretty vocal when she's excited about her toys. As if on cue, Aurora let out a delighted squeal as she successfully knocked over her tower of blocks, clapping her tiny hands together in celebration. Despite the tension, both women smiled at the baby's obvious joy. "She's beautiful," Scarlett said softly.
"She has his eyes."
"Yes, she does," Camila agreed, though the observation no longer felt like a wound the way it had in those first raw weeks after the separation.
"But hopefully that's all she'll inherit from him."
Scarlett winced at the barb, but didn't dispute it. "I came back to Maplewood Heights to clear out some things from storage, and I wanted to find you before I left again. I needed to apologize properly, and to tell you some things I think you should know."
"Such as?"
"I was completely honest that night when I said I didn't know about you or Aurora," Scarlett began, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "But I've spent the past 6 months thinking about all the signs I ignored, all the inconsistencies I explained away because I wanted to believe his story." She paused as Aurora dropped a toy, which Camila retrieved and handed back to her daughter. "He was so convincing about your marriage being over. He showed me what he claimed were divorce papers, fake ones, I realize now. He told me you were living separately, that you'd agreed to wait until after the baby was born to make it official."
"How long?"
Camila asked quietly. "We met in September, at a client mixer. He said he'd been separated since July, before you got pregnant." Scarlett's voice was barely above a whisper. "I thought I was helping a man move on from a marriage that had already ended.
I thought I was the beginning of his new chapter, not the reason for ending his old one."
Camila absorbed this information, feeling a familiar anger flare at Nathaniel's calculated manipulation of both their lives. "Did you love him?" The question seemed to surprise Scarlett. "I thought I did. But I don't think you can really love someone you don't actually know, can you? The man I fell for was a fiction he created, the devoted father going through an amicable divorce, working hard to provide for his child even while building a new life." "He was always good at creating appealing fictions," Camila said dryly. "It took me 6 years to see through them completely." "There's something else," Scarlett continued, her voice growing stronger. "After that night at the hotel, he tried to contact me repeatedly. Calls, texts, emails, even showing up at my office in Portland. He kept insisting that what we had was real, that he was going to fight for our relationship." Camila's eyebrows rose.
"Even after everything that happened?"
"He claimed you'd manipulated the situation, that you'd orchestrated the public confrontation to hurt him and prevent our happiness."
Scarlett's laugh was bitter.
"He actually suggested we could still be together once his divorce was final, that you'd shown your true colors that night and proved his point about why your marriage needed to end." The audacity of it was breathtaking, though Camila realized she shouldn't be surprised. Nathaniel had always been skilled at rewriting history to cast himself as the victim of circumstances beyond his control. "I take it you didn't find his argument compelling," Camila observed. "I had him blocked on everything within a week," Scarlett replied firmly. "Seeing him that night, watching how easily he lied to both of us, how quickly he tried to manipulate the narrative even after being caught, I realized I'd fallen in love with a sociopath." Aurora had grown tired of her blocks and was now reaching for Camila's coffee cup, forcing her to move it out of reach while offering a sippy cup of water instead. The ordinary parenting moment felt surreal against the backdrop of their conversation about betrayal and manipulation. "Why are you telling me this?" Camila asked. "Because I wanted you to know that what happened between us wasn't some grand love affair," Scarlett said. "It was a con game where we were both marks. And because I wanted you to know that when he inevitably tries to convince people that you're the reason his life fell apart, there's at least one person who knows better." Camila studied the other woman's face, seeing genuine remorse and something that might have been respect. "Are you okay?"
"Really?"
"I'm getting there," Scarlett admitted. "Therapy helps. And moving across the country."
"What about you?"
"Same. Though I think I was dealing with 6 years of manipulation instead of 6 months." Camila wiped Aurora's chin with a napkin, marveling at how normal this conversation had become despite its extraordinary circumstances. It's amazing how much clearer everything becomes once you stop making excuses for someone else's behavior.
Yes, Scarlett agreed softly. It really is.
They sat in companionable silence for a moment, two women who had shared the same devastating experience from different angles, both emerged stronger and wiser.
I should go, Scarlett said finally, standing and gathering her purse.
I just wanted you to know that you deserved so much better than what he gave you, and I'm sorry I was unknowingly part of the reason you didn't get it.
We both deserved better, Camila replied.
But I think we're both going to be fine. As Scarlett walked away, Camila felt a sense of closure she hadn't expected. The other woman wasn't her enemy. They'd both been victims of the same man's selfishness and deceit. And in their brief conversation, Camila had glimpsed the future version of herself. Someone who could speak about her marriage's end without bitterness consuming her, someone who had learned from her pain instead of being destroyed by it. Aurora babbled something that sounded remarkably like "Mama," and Camila's heart swelled with the recognition that this sweet, innocent child who deserved so much love and honesty was her real new beginning. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain but clean, challenging but authentic. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, that felt like enough. 1 year later, the autumn sun streamed through the windows of Camila's apartment, painting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor where Aurora was taking her tentative first steps between the coffee table and her mother's outstretched arms. At 15 months old, she had developed into a fearless toddler with an infectious giggle and an independent streak that both delighted and exhausted Camila. "Come on, baby girl," Camila encouraged, crouched on the floor with her arms wide. "You can do it." Aurora wobbled for a moment, her chubby hands gripping the edge of the coffee table, before launching herself toward her mother with a kind of absolute trust that still took Camila's breath away. 4 unsteady steps later, she tumbled into Camila's embrace, both of them laughing as they rolled onto the soft area rug. The apartment had transformed over the past year into something that felt genuinely like home. The walls were decorated with Aurora's handprint art from daycare, family photos that included only the people who had proven themselves trustworthy, and a large canvas print of the Rocky Mountains that Carmen had sent as a reminder that fresh starts were possible at any altitude. Camila's phone rang from the kitchen counter, and she recognized Margaret Rivera's number. The relationship with Nathaniel's mother had been one of the most difficult casualties of the divorce, though Margaret had surprised everyone by taking Camila's side after learning the full truth about her son's behavior. "Hola, Margaret," Camila answered, settling Aurora in her playpen with a collection of soft toys. "Mija, I wanted to call before you heard it from someone else." Margaret's voice carried a weight that immediately put Camila on alert. "Nathaniel is getting married." Camila felt a strange disconnect, as if she were receiving news about a distant acquaintance rather than her ex-husband.
"Married? To whom?"
"A woman named Jessica Walsh. She works at his new job in Phoenix." Margaret's tone was carefully neutral. The engagement announcement was in the Maplewood Heights Herald this morning. "They're planning a Christmas wedding." Camila absorbed this information while watching Aurora stack blocks with determined concentration. Nathaniel had moved to Phoenix 8 months ago after losing his job at Rivera and Associates, a consequence of the professional reputation damage that had followed his very public personal scandal. She'd heard through their shared lawyer that he was working for a smaller firm and had been trying to rebuild his career away from the whispers that still followed him in Maplewood Heights. "How do you feel about it?" Margaret asked gently.
"Honestly,"
Camila considered the question carefully. "I feel sorry for her, and I hope she's smarter than I was about asking the right questions." It was true. The overwhelming emotion wasn't jealousy or anger, but genuine pity for the woman who was apparently about to become Nathaniel's next victim. Because Camila understood now that there would always be a next victim. Men like Nathaniel didn't change their fundamental nature, they just found new stages for their performances. "He's been trying to arrange visits with Aurora," Margaret continued. "He's called me 3 times asking if I could help facilitate some kind of meeting." Camila's protective instincts flared instantly.
What did you tell him? That he needs to work through the courts like everyone else, Margaret replied firmly. That little girl doesn't need the confusion of a father who shows up when it's convenient and disappears when life gets complicated. The custody arrangement had been deliberately structured to protect Aurora from exactly this kind of disruption. Nathaniel had supervised visitation rights that he could exercise with proper legal notice and psychological evaluation, but he'd never followed through on any of the requirements. Apparently, being a part-time father from a distance was more complicated than he'd anticipated when he'd been planning his new life with Scarlett. "I appreciate you telling me," Camila said. "And I appreciate everything you've done to support Aurora and me this year." "You're still family to me," Margaret said simply. "What my son did, it doesn't reflect who you are or who that beautiful granddaughter of mine is." After ending the call, Camila found herself thinking not about Nathaniel's impending marriage, but about how completely her perspective had shifted over the past year. The news that once would have devastated her now felt like confirmation of a pattern she was grateful to no longer be part of. She'd spent the year building something entirely new, a life that belonged completely to her and Aurora, free from the exhausting work of trying to decode someone else's lies and manage someone else's emotions. She'd returned to nursing part-time, finding deep satisfaction in work that felt meaningful and honest. She'd made new friends through Aurora's daycare, women who were building their own versions of unconventional families and finding strength in authenticity rather than appearances. Most importantly, she'd learned to trust her own instincts again. The woman who had spent months second-guessing her suspicions and making excuses for inexcusable behavior had been replaced by someone who understood that her peace of mind was worth more than any relationship built on deception. Aurora's babbling drew her attention back to the present moment. Her daughter had managed to stack 3 blocks successfully and was clapping her hands in celebration, clearly expecting acknowledgement of her architectural achievement. "That's amazing, sweetheart," Camila said, settling onto the floor beside her daughter. "You're getting so good at building things." And that, she realized, was the perfect metaphor for their life. They were building something new every day. Aurora's confidence, Camila's independence, their bond as a family of 2 that was complete and sufficient. No missing pieces, no foundation cracks hidden beneath beautiful facades. Her phone chimed with a text from Rachel. "Coffee tomorrow? I have news about the promotion." Camila smiled as she typed back, "Absolutely. Aurora and I will be there." This was her life now. Simple plans with honest people, conversations where the subtext matched the text, relationships built on mutual respect rather than careful management of someone else's ego. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd walked down the aisle 6 years ago, but it was infinitely better than the alternative she'd escaped. As the afternoon light shifted across the apartment, Camila watched Aurora explore her small kingdom with the fearless curiosity that came from knowing she was completely safe and unconditionally loved. This little girl would grow up understanding that love meant consistency, that trust was earned through actions rather than promises, and that her worth wasn't dependent on someone else's ability to see it. Outside, autumn was giving way to winter, but inside their small, honest space, everything was warmth and possibility. Nathaniel could marry whomever he chose, spin whatever story made him comfortable, build whatever new fiction would help him sleep at night. Camila and Aurora had something better than fiction. They had truth, and each other, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing they were exactly where they belonged. The ending of her marriage hadn't been the ending of her story. It had been the beginning of the most important chapter yet, the one where she was finally, completely, authentically herself. And that was worth celebrating, one ordinary, beautiful day at a time. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.